Stats on that. In the state of Virginia, if you're 18 years or older, you cannot have Medicaid unless you are pregnant, recently pregnant, blind, disabled, or the parent or caretaker of a related minor. And then if you fall into one of those categories, then you have to fit into a certain income qualification, which, for instance, for a pregnant mom would be 133% of the federal poverty level. For someone who is not one of the other categories, but is a parent caretaker of a minor child, so they don't have any of the other things that get them into one of those categories, they would have to be at about 27% of the federal poverty level. The federal poverty level, 100% for a family of four is about $22,000 a year for a family of four. For a two-person household, it's about $14,000. So take about a third of that, and that's how where you would have to be to qualify for Medicaid. So I'm not bringing that up as a political statement saying that Medicaid should be expanded. I'm just trying to let you know why there is a need for a crossover, and I think it's a need that we readily, excitedly are able to come in and meet those people that fall through that crack. A quick portrait of the people that we serve. There's kind of a couple different categories. We've always served the generationally poor, is how I would put it, people whose parents have been in poverty and they've been in poverty and they've been born into that and are having trouble getting out of poverty. We've also always served what I would call the working poor, people who are maybe roofers or painters in town that can't afford health insurance or it's not provided by their employer. And then more recently, we've actually seen a lot of white-collar workers to high-end blue-collar workers that have lost jobs, already have heart disease or diabetes or something along those lines, lose health insurance, no longer can afford to pay COBRA after about a month because they no longer have income, and then are left making the choice between, do I pay my rent or do I keep paying for my diabetes medicines? And we actually see a lot of patients that come to us from the emergency room because they've been without their medicines for however many months, and they come with a stack of prescriptions in their hand that they received that they can't afford and they don't know what to do. And it's very sad. It's also very, I definitely feel that we're called to be there, and I'm glad that we're there to help them in the midst of that. So those are some of the types of people that we see. I think we see people that would kind of fit into the woman at the well category, as well as the woman who Jesus healed who had been bleeding for years and years. The woman at the well who's been bleeding for years and years, she hasn't done anything to herself to cause herself to have that problem. The woman at the well, obviously Jesus met her and was not shy about meeting her and confronted her rather directly. The fact that he even spent time with her showed how much he cared for her, but he was meeting someone there who had made some bad choices in their own life, and that had led to their predicament. And as people that are changed by the gospel ourselves, and ourselves have both of those things in our own lives, have things that are just bad circumstances as well as things that we've done to ourselves, myself. As God has shown us mercy, it's a privilege to show others mercy. So that's the basics of who Crossover is and who we serve and why there's a need for us. And those are kind of the basics. I think as we consider some of these people that I've mentioned, some of the patients that we see, I think one of the most important things to think about is when that person who's suffering is in front of you, there's not much of a theological discussion as far as what to do. Sometimes we have people that come over with questionable means or that we're not sure if they really should be a patient of ours, if the eligibility process was right or whatever, but they have a huge need. You take care of the need first. You treat people with the love of Christ first. You ask those questions later. I think when you get to healthcare reform and bigger issues like that, it is a little bit more nuanced, and we have to really search the scriptures more deeply. And I think healthcare obviously needs to be reformed. The question is how. I think there's many dangers, and this is just speaking from my personal view. This is not Crossover's view. We have a variety of opinions, I'm sure, on our board on this issue. I think there's many dangers of more government involvement. One of the questions on the website for this conference was, should healthcare be universal? My answer is yes. I think healthcare should be universal without a doubt. When I say that, you're probably thinking that I'm saying that universal care should be provided by the government. And I actually don't see that as a goal, but I do feel as a Christian it is our responsibility to work as hard as we can to do everything we can to bring health care to all people that are in need, whether that's through this ministry or incentives, kind of as Terrell alluded to, that the government might set up. Regardless, I do think that we should do all that we can to help those who are in need. There are other dangers of government involvement. There's wait times for everyone involved. We are very blessed at Crossover for our patients to be able to get people in for the tests that they need through the generosity of local health systems. There's ethical issues that the government may force on doctors that make me afraid. At the same time, there are dangers on the free market side if we go too far in that direction. And I think we're seeing some of those things. Healthcare is not a good to be consumed. Healthcare is a service. It's not something that should be sold and bought as we sell and buy food or something, or that's maybe not a good example, but clothing or those things. It's a service. It's service to those in need, and the free market sometimes needs some restraints. Another thing that I would like to bring up is that more important than healthcare reform, I think American culture reform and spiritual reform is the most important thing that we need. I've heard Dr. Stern actually speak a little bit to this before when he talks about one of the most important, if not the most important issue in Richmond and across the country in healthcare is not necessarily obesity or infant mortality, but the breakdown of the family, the lack of fathers investing in the lives of their children, those type of issues playing out. And I think those are the things that, as much as we need to focus on getting the policy right, we can get the perfect policy, but if we continue to live the same lifestyles that we live, it's not going to matter. We're going to be burdened with debt no matter which way we go if we can't learn to live healthier lives. And that starts deeper than just choices that we make with exercise. It starts with personal spiritual renewal. Just a few stats along those lines, because I want to make sure that's just a part of the discussion, and then I'll be done. It's estimated that about 50% of healthcare costs currently are attributed to lifestyle or behavior-related illnesses. About 63 million adults, which is about 30% of the population, are now considered to be obese, and that represents about a doubling of the rate since just 1980. And kind of on a smaller scale of that, a McDonald's original hamburger, fries, and a 12-ounce Coke used to deliver about 590 calories. Today, a supersized meal delivers about 1,550 calories. So I'm not calling for government regulation of the restaurant industry, but what I am calling for is that we consider our choices. Maybe, what do we eat when we get together as Christians? Maybe is something we need to think about as a family on a regular basis. What lifestyle choices are we making, and how does that personal responsibility translate into our corporate responsibility to care for each other? I think that's about all I have. Thank you.